you let your colleagues know that we're ready to start, please?
Sure.
You find them or text them or something?
Sure.
Thank you. You be seated. We're just waiting for your colleagues. Everybody ready to resume? Thank you. Okay. We're at a sentencing stage now. Pre-sentence investigation was ordered and has been received. Does either side have any corrections they wish to make to the pre-sentence investigation?
Your Honor, on behalf of the state, no.
Sorry.
Any corrections or amendments?
No corrections.
All right. Then we'll proceed on further. I will inquire of the government, do you wish to present evidence in aggravation, either witnesses or documentary evidence?
The answer is yes, Your Honor.
Sure. You may do so.
Mr. Mendenhall will be
Okay.
presenting the witness statement.
Your Honor, I have a victim impact statement that I would like to, I've been asked to present on behalf of the City of Chicago and Superintendent Brown of the Chicago Police Department. As you correctly pointed out, is of some length, so I tried to condense, and I'm only going to read the relevant portion, but I will point out for the media and for the public watching, the full statement has been filed and made available to the court, as well as defense counsel. So again, Your Honor, the letter is on behalf of Stephen Kane, Deputy Corporation Counsel, and David O. Brown, Superintendent, Chicago Police Department. As the jury concluded, Mr. Smollett falsely reported to the Chicago Police Department that he was a victim of a hate crime. Specifically, Mr. Smollett told the CPD that two people attacked him, placed a rope around his neck, poured a chemical on him, and called him homophobic and racist slurs, and stated that this is, quote, MAGA country, end quote. Mr. Smollett claimed he did not know his attackers, but that one of them was white-skinned. A massive investigation ensued, costing the city and its residents well over $100,000. For the following weeks, more than 30 Chicago police officers and detectives investigated Mr. Smollett's report by conducting witness interviews, reviewing over 1,500 hours of surveillance video, in-car camera videos from taxis collected by detectives, as well as other evidence. These same detectives also gathered documentary evidence, including ride-share records, store receipts, store videos, and knocked on doors, going door to door during the polar vortex, one of the coldest periods in Chicago history. During this period, the detectives and police officers worked around the clock, amassing over 1,000 hours of overtime in an effort to solve what in the beginning was thought to be a horrible hate crime. The overwhelming stress and fatigue that was put on the Chicago officers who were involved in the case was immense. While the city can address the financial cost of Mr. Smollett's false report and the investigation that ensued, a cost that can never be measured, is the harm caused by reducing the likelihood of actual victims of hate crimes willing to report these crimes. In CPD's experience, hate crime victims are frequently hesitant to come forward and cooperate in police investigations out of fear that they will not be believed or they will be targeted for additional crimes. Members of these communities often feel marginalized even before suffering the indignity of the hate crime. When crimes are not reported, the perpetrator is not punished and remains free to commit other crimes, endangering public safety. This is particularly problematic in the context of hate crime because these crimes harm not only the individual victim, but also others who share the victim's trait, creating fear in the broader community. Falsely reporting hate crime have a tremendous chilling effect on the real victims. Indeed, Mr. Smollett himself acknowledged that, quote, you do a disservice when you lie about things like this, end quote. The financial cost of investigating Mr. Smollett's false hate crime report was significant. CPD spent 1,426 hours in regular shift time investigating his false reports at a cost of $67,000 $734 in employee time. CPD also spent 1,837 overtime hours investigating Mr. Smollett's false report, costing the city $130,106. A spreadsheet calculating these expenditures is attached as Exhibit A. Your Honor, we respectfully submit that restitution for the city is warranted here. Illinois law authorizes restitution to compensate the victim of a crime for out-of-pocket expenses, damages, losses, or injuries found to have been proximately caused by the conduct of the defendant. Government victims may recover restitution for expenses that go beyond the normal cost of investigating crime. That is exactly what happened here. The city is a victim of Mr. Smollett's crime because of his false report caused CPD to expend scarce resources that could have been devoted to solving actual crimes, increasing public safety. The city is not seeking restitution for the regular salaries of the officers involved, but CPD's overtime expenses that go beyond the normal cost of investigating crimes and are thus recoverable. A restitution award as part of Mr. Smollett's criminal sentence would enable the city to avoid these costs and delays. For these reasons, we respectfully request that you seek restitution for the city in the amount of $130,106 as part of Mr. Smollett's sentence. Sincerely, Stephen J. Kane, Deputy Corporation Counsel, City of Chicago. David O. Brown, Superintendent, Chicago Police Department. Your Honor, a copy of the full letter has been made a part of the record. Thank you.
I received it. Thank you. Does that conclude your evidence and aggravation?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Does the defense have evidence, witnesses, or documents that they wish to present in mitigation?
Yes, Your Honor.
Sure. You may proceed, Mr. Allen.
Thank you.
Judge, we would call witness Rich Daniels.
Rich Daniels, sir, please step up right here. Hi. Please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, self you got?
I do.
All right. Please have a seat. Try to keep your voice up. You're welcome to take your mask off if you want to. If you
Thank
prefer
you.
to keep it on, that's okay too. It's entirely up to you.
Thank you.
Ms. Waddell, you may inquire.
Thank you very much, Judge. Sir, in a loud, clear voice, would you please introduce yourself, state your first and last name, and spell your last name?
Sure, my name is Richard Daniels. My last name is D-A-N-I-E-L-S. And I'm sorry, what else did you ask?
Sorry. Mr. Daniels, how old are you?
Oh, really?
Yes, sir.
I'm 61 years old.
All right. And are you familiar with a person by the name of Jussie Smollett?
Yes, I am.
How are you familiar with him?
I met Jussie 8 years ago this month when I was the music director on the television show Empire, for which I was the on-camera music person for all 102 episodes and all 6 seasons.
So in what capacity did you know Mr. Smollett while working on Empire?
Jussie was the breakout music star on the show, and as the music director for the on-camera work, I worked with him closely, daily, for many years of the show, as helping to support him in terms of his role on the show.
All right. Now, in terms of his role in the show musically, how did you help support him in that way?
We put musicians on camera around him. In the 6 seasons that we did Empire, we would put around Jussie and other cast members and guest artists, musicians from the community. So 400 different musicians and vocalists appeared on that show from the local Chicago community over the 6 seasons we had the show, many of which performed with Jussie, and many of which he embraced dearly as friends over that period of time.
Did Mr. Smollett also have any hand in making sure, securing any of these musical artists for the
He
show?
would sometimes voice opinions and give me approval or tell me what he's looking for, so of course there was interaction that way. And through that process, we became very good friends.
So outside of the show, you said you became very good friends. What type of things would you say you did with Mr. Smollett?
I was very active, and I continue to be active in the world of nonprofits in Chicago, supporting various things. And so I would tell Jussie about certain things that we were active with. And as a celebrity, I would say it would be very meaningful if you might consider participating and donating your time and your talent, which he willingly did on many occasions, and it was always a very meaningful experience for those who saw him and interacted with him, and meaningful for those of us who brought him out.
Now, Mr. Daniels, I'm going to ask you briefly to, if you can, go through just a few of these nonprofits or any of them. I know that there's one that was relevant with the Boys and Girls Clubs of America.
That was a meeting we had that
Okay.
never went beyond the meeting stages. But the one that was really relevant was a school on the west side of Chicago, a grade school. And it has 505 African-American children. I believe it's the largest population of African-American children in a grade school system in America. That's what they talk about. Magnificent school. I was brought in a few years prior to Jussie coming in, asking to support it in various ways. And their mission was so great, it was easy to jump in. I asked Jussie if he'd come over. He willingly said yes. And for me, it was an extraordinary life experience because we didn't tell the children who was coming that day. And it also led me to believe of what a huge show Empire had become in the African-American community. We didn't tell the children he was coming to their classrooms that day. Each classroom we walked into with Jussie, the children jumped up with joy, ran to him, hugged him, cried with him. It was an amazing experience. It was cathartic to witness it and to see it happen because the impact he had as his celebrity and as this loving, wonderful young man was dramatic. It was really quite something. I was very taken by it, as were those who were with me that day, as were the people who were administrators at the facility. And that was one example of the many that he participated in, of giving his time and his talent. He is a very charismatic young man. He's a very loving and caring young man. And, he was generous, and he was thoughtful, and he was kind, funny, and intelligent, and I just think the world of him.
Now, aside from his time, talents, energies, charisma, all of these beautiful things that you just stated about Mr. Smollett that he willingly and abundantly gives, would you say that he gives anything else of himself or from himself to communities or anybody else around him?
I know of charitable contributions he's made in large sums of money, and I know of large projects he supported financially in addition to his time and talent. So he covered all the bases of time, treasure, and talent in terms of his giving and his willing to participate in the community. And it was always with a loving heart. It was always with a willingness to do good and to give back to what he had been given. He knew he was a lucky young man. This show Empire, this was catching lightning in a bottle for all of us who were able to be on it. There were 593 scripted television shows made in America last year. 593. I think back to when I was a kid and there were like 12. And there were 593. So content is everything. So the competition is fierce. Empire was one of 3% of all television shows to get beyond 5 seasons. Doesn't happen. We think of shows that have long lives to them. That's fine. But the number of shows that have long lives, very few and far between. So Jussie had an appreciation for that, what he was given, as did all of us on that show. It was a game changer for Chicago. The community embraced that show in huge ways. The first episode of season 2 had 29 million viewers. Those are major sporting event numbers. And that made Jussie a huge presence in the community, both in television and in the community at large.
Would you say that based on all of Mr. Smollett's contributions that he was absolutely a pivotal part in the show's success?
Oh, he was. He was the music star of the show. I'm sure that Terrence and Taraji and anybody else would tell you the same thing. Jussie was the music star of the show. Everyone else participated in it, but he was the day in, day out go-to music guy. He was our breakout music star on the show.
Now, Mr. Daniels, would you be willing and able to support Mr. Smollett if he were given a chance at a term of probation in this matter?
Of course. It's part of my daily activities in Chicago and the thing I'm most proud of.
You don't believe that there would be any issues that Mr. Smollett would ever exhibit on a period of probation?
None that I would have ever seen or ever thought of.
You have one moment, Judge. Thank you.
Is it okay to take a sip?
Yes, sir.
Just going back briefly, Mr. Daniels, of all of the incredible services you said Mr. Smollett gave himself to willingly, those were not required of Mr. Smollett in any way, were they?
They were not.
Neither by the show or any agency that you're aware of, correct?
No, absolutely not.
So you believe that in addition to any of the, again, services that Mr. Smollett gives willingly of himself, that if he were given a term of either probation or some kind of community service, would you be willing or able to either supervise that or make sure that he would be compliant and continue to give himself to community service and service of others?
Absolutely. Happy to.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels.
Thank you.
Any cross-examination?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Daniels, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
May I call your next witness?
Yes, Ms. Gelman.
Please step up. Please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, Your Honor.
Thank you. Please be seated. Try to keep your voice up. You're welcome to take your mask off if you like. If you want to keep it on, it's entirely up to you. Both masks. Mr. Allen, you may depart.
Thank you. Ma'am, please state your name
Sharon Gelman,
and spell your first and last name for me.
SharonGelman.
I know my mother would kill me for this question, but I'm going to have to ask how old are you?
62.
Okay. And what do you do for work?
Well, now I'm a writer, editor, and a nonprofit consultant, but for many years I ran a nonprofit called Artists for a New South Africa.
Okay. Without telling me your address or anything, what state do you live in?
I now reside in Maryland in the Washington, D.C. area.
And did you fly in for this specific purpose?
I did.
And why specifically did you fly in for this purpose?
Jussie's like family to me. I've known him for well over half of his life and a good chunk of my own. And I came because I was hoping that I could help people see the Jussie that I know.
So do you remember around the time you first met Jussie?
I met him in 1999.
That's very specific, okay. And so why does that stick out, 1999 when you met him?
We were producing an event. It was the 10th anniversary of my organization's existence, and it was the 5th anniversary of South Africa's new democracy. And we were doing a specific portion of the event. Desmond Tutu was our keynote speaker, and ambassadors, and Sidney Poitier. We were doing a specific portion which was about the role of young people in the struggle against apartheid. And I asked the artists who were founders and our board members who would be like a wonderful young artist, someone with great talent and great heart to include, and they all suggested Jussie Smollett, and it was in that context that I met Jussie, who at that time was representing her, working on her behalf.
So back in 99, Jussie would have been a younger man.
He was 16.
Right. Even back then, what were your impressions of Jussie?
Well, he was when I called and spoke to him. We wrote a letter asking Journey to participate, and I got a very professional phone call back from someone named Jussie, and I was very impressed with him. And he said, "I do public relations for Journey." And then he came into the office to meet me, and in walked this like utterly beautiful young man, and I was like, "Oh my God, you're a baby!" That was when I learned he was Journey's brother.
Did you even get the feeling back then in 99 that Jussie understood the significance of the event that he was attending in South Africa?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, the whole Smollett family is very charitably and politically engaged. And, Jussie and Journey were very excited to be involved. I mean, I think Jussie, because being raised up and exposed to the arts and entertainment community from a very, very young age as little children, they understood the power that that fame confers, and they also understood the responsibility. So they loved the idea of using Journey's very baby, embryonic star power to do something good in the world.
Sure. So after 99, did you continue to have a relationship with Jussie?
Yes, Journey and Jussie and Jake and Jazz and Janet, the whole J family, would often come in and volunteer. They would stuff envelopes. I mean, they were like a all-service vehicle that, you know, it's like, do you need us on stage? Do you need us sweeping the floor? They would just do all kinds of things. And then, gosh, I think it was around 2006. It might have been late 2005. We needed another staff person. We were a tiny organization, and I hired Jussie then, and he came and worked for me full-time for 4 years in the office.
What was Jussie's role after he was hired?
Well, he started off as my administrative assistant, and he will forgive me, I hope, by saying that Jussie has many talents. Paperwork is not really one of them. But he was so good with the staff and with our volunteers and with our interns. I mean, we were a tiny organization, and we did big things, and we depended on the largesse, not only of our celebrity members, but also of students and grassroots community folks who came in. And Jussie just was really stellar at making everyone involved, from the highest and mightiest and most world-renowned to, you know, the kids we were working with in the inner city, making them feel special and welcome. And we worked really hard, and he was one of those people who had the rare gift of making hard work fun. So he really played a very, very pivotal role, and I promoted him pretty quickly. He became the coordinator and manager of our charity auctions, and then we produced an audiobook in honor of we announced it on Mr. Mandela's 90th birthday, and we released it on its 91st birthday with a major publisher and 26 celebrities from all over the world, renowned people of all backgrounds. And Jussie, you know, was very involved in coordinating that. And as I said, he was willing to do anything. He was willing to, you know, go pick people up. He was a good photographer, so he would document the sessions. You know, anything that needed doing, Jussie was willing to do it.
Right. I got a little starstruck when I heard Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu. So what exactly did your organization do?
Well, we were founded in 1989. Alfre, Woodard, and brought together a bunch of people. It was during the height. We didn't realize then that it was towards the end of apartheid, but it was the height of still continued conflict, and she had been with the Congressional Black Caucus, and they were talking about people needed to go back and work in their communities. So Alfre came back and organized her community, and I got involved. I think I showed up at the third meeting. I heard about it, and I never left. We raised money. We raised awareness. We over our years, we raised and granted $9 million to frontline groups in South Africa doing African-based, African-led organizations doing AIDS work, democratic development, youth education, economic development, and we harnessed the ability of our members to raise awareness about HIV/AIDS prevention and treatment, about the voting process, both in South Africa and in the U.S. We always tried to match what we were doing in South Africa with a related issue locally, either in Los Angeles or in the United States, so that we weren't, being those people who care a whole lot about something thousands of miles away but don't care about the community that you can drive to or live in.
Sure. So During Jussie's time working there, I heard that you put him in charge of charitable contributions, which seems like
Charitable auctions.
charitable auction, which seems like a very important job. Can you describe that?
Yeah, well, he did. I mean, that was one of the things he did.
Yeah.
But for that, what he would do is he would contact our donors and celebrity members and others of resources and ask for things that we could either auction off live or online. So live at a big event or online. And so it would be everything from, I think, our two highest money-making things, or our three, were Jillian Anderson, who was a board member, gave us passes to the wrap party for the final season of X-Files. Jackson Brown let us auction off, I think it was, well, he let us auction off someone coming and working with him in a studio to record their song, which ended up being a really long process because the person wasn't a musician, but we earned a lot of charity dollars in the process. And then I think our other highest generating item was a luncheon, private luncheon with Archbishop Desmond Tutu.
So this was from 1999 when you first met Jussie. Now we're at from 1999 to 2010, since he worked those 4 years. Can you explain the growth in his character you observed during that time?
Well, Jussie, I mean, obviously he went from being a very young, adolescent to an adult. I mean, I would say his character was the same. He was a very open-hearted, hardworking, pure-hearted person. I mean, he didn't have a car. He rode a bus 1 hour each way to our office, and sometimes I would drive him partway home. And he would always be like, no, I'm fine, I don't mind. It's like he was like, I'm so excited to get up every morning and do something to make the world a better place. I mean, he was like evangelical in that way of really believing in the cause. And he got paid very little. We wanted all of our money to go to the front lines, but nonetheless, he got paid really little. And every time I would sort of apologize to him for that, he would be like, no, I'm so, like, I feel so excited and lucky to be part of this. And we became friends. I mean, I loved all my employees and I believed in them, but Jussie and I also became real friends.
Wow. So after 2010, did you kept in contact with Jussie?
Oh, absolutely, regularly.
In what way, mostly?
Well, sometimes it would be him wanting to figure out a way to make a difference. So he had witnessed all these people, Sam Jackson, Denzel Washington, Sidney Poitier, who could use their position to benefit others. And so that was such a deep part of who Jussie was, and he also understood it from helping those people to do that work. So sometimes he would call. I remember him calling me right when the story broke about the water in Flint, Michigan, and he was literally sobbing on the phone, just going like, I can't believe what's going on, and I really want to make a difference, and here's what I'm sort of thinking of, and would you help me figure out if it's the right way to go? And I want to give money, but I also want to go and bring supplies, but I also just want to show up for people, and I want to, he was always trying to figure out how to do what he could do best. And a lot of what he did in those ways, I mean, he understood the power of standing up for people, and that the TV cameras would follow, and that maybe others would follow his example. But he also did a lot of what he did during that time anonymously and quietly, but he still did the due diligence of figuring out which group is good and how do you figure that out, and I'm going to call people I know and do my research so that my dollars are well spent and are making a real difference.
Sure. So Jussie went from taking a bus to your office to becoming a worldwide phenomenon on a TV show. Did you notice any change in his personality when he gained that phenomenal success?
Not really. I mean, he was still Jussie. He was funny and sweet, and he was so, like, you know, effervescent about this magical thing that had happened to him. And I think for all of us who worked with him at ANSA, Artists for New South Africa, whether board members or, I mean, we were all so thrilled for him. It was like, you know, we all knew he was talented. We had him perform at a couple of our events once he started performing musically, and we were all fans. And but you know, I mean, he wore it well. He wore his fame responsibly, and he understood sort of the requirements that come with that kind of position if you want to be a good decent person living in the world.
So if Jussie was given a period of probation in this case, would you be willing to help supervise to make sure that that probation period goes fantastic?
Absolutely. I mean, I call on Jussie. I've called on Jussie to help me on things all in these years after he's worked for me. I mean, most recently, in the middle of all of this, I was helping with an auction for Desmond Tutu's 90th, which ended up being his final birthday before he died. And I called Jussie and asked for his help. And I was like, I'm sorry to do this while you're going through all this. And he's like, no, God, this is like, thank you. This gives me something else to think about. And he really went out of his way, bent over backwards to try and get some contributions. So I would be honored and would take it very seriously if to help Jussie continue to be a really deeply contributing member to society.
Okay. One moment, please, John.
Sure.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any cross-examination?
No cross-examination, Your Honor.
Ms. Gelman, thank you kindly.
Thank you.
Other witnesses you care to call?
Yes, Judge. Judge, we'll be calling Juror Smollett, Mr. Smollett's older brother. He's going to give a statement to the court. And then
Okay.
afterwards, Mrs. Smollett's grandmother will
Sure.
also give a statement.
You come up on the witness stand, please.
Can you go right in there?
If he prefers. He's just going to read a statement, a narrative.
Yeah.
All right, I'm not going to put him under oath. I don't think it's required, but please, Mr. Smollett.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Your Honor, before I just want to say a few things. I don't know if it was done sarcastically, but mentioned my family earlier, Mr. Weaver, about us passing notes and prayer sessions. Trying to understand that my brother right here is on trial. And while this might just be a level 4 felony to a lot of people, under the circumstances, this has felt like the reincarnation of Al Capone's trial, okay? To be honest. And it's not your fault. I'm not trying to say it's your fault, I'm saying, but the way that this has been, so that's probably the reason you see us sharing notes and doing prayer sessions. My mom's 69 years old. She was born in 1952 in Texas. All right? She knows a thing about racism. She doesn't really need a lecture about the extent of racism. Neither does an openly gay African-American man. All right? I strongly believe, you know what I'm going to say, I strongly believe in my brother's innocence. But I'm not going to rehash try to relitigate the issues in the case today. Your Honor, I come before you humbly to request leniency when you sentence my brother. Please remember that we are currently living in a time in which we are enduring a vicious pandemic, extreme economic uncertainty, a major conflict in Eastern Europe, and global paradigm shifts taking place everywhere. As human beings, we are collectively worn down. But Jussie Smollett is not at the source of the socioeconomic and political problems on Earth. On quite the contrary, he is a man who has been a beacon of hope, charity, and philanthropy to his nation and to his community. He has made real efforts in his lifetime to promote equality and love among all of humanity. He has expressed strong political views and has stood against injustice wherever he thinks it may lie. His criticism of powerful individuals, organizations, and practices does not make him a bad person, okay, or someone who should be punished. It simply makes him an American. I'm sure that Mr. Dan Webb was once on former President Ronald Reagan's radar for his criticism during the Iran-Contra prosecutions, all right? But standing up to powers and authorities in America is what makes us, part of what makes us American. And he turned out to have a pretty successful career after he stood up to power. Jussie does not have malice or hatred toward anyone, and it is truly unfortunate that his reputation has received so many negative connotations, and he has never received the benefit of the doubt or a proper presumption of innocence. And even though I completely disagree with the jury's decision in this case, I am not attempting to rehash it here. I only want to give support to the point that Jussie should not be incarcerated. Jussie Smollett is my younger brother. I know you're going to think I'm biased. I am 5 years older than he is, and I can remember him at infancy. He has always been a loyal, loving, and creative human being. He is not a threat to the people of Illinois. And in my humble opinion, Jussie is completely innocent, but even for those, once again, who think he is guilty, the crime he has been accused of is not even considered a felony in most states. Furthermore, here in Illinois and in Cook County, disorderly conduct is oftentimes not even prosecuted and charges are frequently dropped. Incarceration of any kind would send the wrong message, especially in a time in which we as a nation have expressed in a bipartisan plurality the desire to see real criminal justice reform and an end to unnecessary mass incarceration, which predominantly affects African Americans, Hispanics and Latinos, and poor and impoverished white people. We also know now that as a nation that calls itself free, we cannot do so while continuing to incarcerate more nonviolent offenders than any other nation in the world. Mass incarceration is also an unnecessary burden to the taxpayers, to law enforcement, and it is simply unjust and wrong. For those who believe that Jussie is guilty once again and needs more punishment, I would also ask you to consider the gut-wrenching and stomach-turning punishment he has already experienced for the last 3 years. The TV show that he poured so much labor and commitment into making a success was ripped away from him even before he was criminally tried. The fact is, the overwhelming majority of mass and online media reporting in early 2019 resulted in a premature assumption of guilt, and the court of public opinion had already convicted Jussie in early 2019. For the last 3 years, he has had to live in anxiety and in a certain kind of pseudo form of house arrest. As a public figure, he has had to deal with public scorn and the real security threats associated with being an accused celebrity. He was, in essence, quarantining almost a year before the COVID-19 pandemic even began. Now, we all know the Sixth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution guarantees the right to a speedy trial. In my opinion, it is unfathomable for me to stand here in March of 2022 pleading with Your Honor not to give my brother jail time for a low-level offense that is alleged to have been committed in early 2019. For those who believe he is guilty, once again, trust me when I say that the punishment he has already received has far exceeded the actual alleged offense that you accuse him of. Your Honor, there's been a lot talked about, restoring public trust. In my opinion, you don't restore public trust by demonstrating to the public that a level 4 felony, which once again is not even what he's accused of, not even a felony charge in most states in America, by giving him a stiff sentence, which includes jail time. That's not restoring public trust. That's in my opinion, all right? And if you were to go 5 miles in any direction in this area, from this courthouse, and talk to people in the community, you're not going to say, they're not going to tell you, oh yeah, we restored the public trust because Jussie Smollett went to jail. Trust me, it's not going to happen, all right? This is not restoring public trust, all right? We are dealing with a lot of things in the world right now, and sending him to jail would not be restoring public trust. So please also keep in mind that, like myself, many people view this case as nothing more than a he said, she said kind of case. all right, with no evidence to have warranted his conviction in the first place. With that in mind, Your Honor, I am humbly requesting that your sentencing of my brother not include any incarceration. I myself and my entire family will be eternally grateful. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there an additional witness that would like to say something today? Mr. Allen, how about a chair? Would that be helpful?
I'm gonna.
I need a mic.
She's the boss, Judge. She's gonna tell me where to go.
I want to be heard.
Okay. Fair enough.
Thank you so much. Sure. Thank you, Karen. Okay. Good to be here. Okay.
All right.
I thank you for this opportunity to allow me to make this statement. My name is Molly Smollett, and I am 92 years old. I have lived in New Mexico for over 25 years, but I am originally from New York, where I was a film editor. I am the proud grandmother of Jussie and his siblings. I felt compelled to come and tell you that the Jussie I know and love does not match up with the media's betrayal of him. And I'm talking to you guys. You haven't done a good job on investigative reporting. I've worked on documentaries. I know what it is. I've gone through the McCarthy period. I marched with Martin Luther King and the March on Washington, and I'm here now. And so you got to do better. I challenge you to do more investigative reporting. Jussie himself, as you have heard from the testimonials, is a very gentle, kind, and generous young man, and his empathy is infinite, which translates in giving of himself. Jussie has always been active in the pressing issues facing our communities, such as HIV, AIDS, voting rights, and other urgent social problems in America. One Christmas, he went to Flint, Michigan to entertain children who were living with lead poisoning from their drinking water. What the media may not know is that Jussie is what I call a justice warrior. He has been active against injustice all his life, as his mother has, who is an incredible rock for her children. And as my son, their father, who sadly passed away from cancer 7 years ago, only in his 50s. And I know in my heart that my son, Jussie's father, would have wanted me to come here to tell you who the real Jussie is. I also have fought against injustice forever, and I feel it's in our DNA. I attribute this to being Jewish and the persecution of my ancestors. The Hebrew words tikkun olam means to repair the world, and that's what I do, and that's what Jussie does. I will end by saying that Jussie is loved and respected by all who know him. And I ask you, the judge, not to send him to prison. If you do, send me along with him, okay? And I thank you for letting me talk. Thank you so much. And thank you all. It's nice to be in Chicago.
Thank you kindly.
Thank you.
Shay, you can help her get back
Thanks.
with the family.
Yeah, thank you so much. They have suffered so much.
I see.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay. The next one. Thank you.
Right. Mr. Uche, any other live witnesses you care to present today?
Judge, none at this time. I believe, I'm just checking Mr. Allen real quick. Okay. No, Judge, just the statements to be.
Okay. All right. I've heard evidence in aggravation, evidence in mitigation. I'll now entertain arguments in aggravation and mitigation, starting with the Office of Special Prosecutor.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
I'm sorry. Excuse me.
You want us to
Yes. Okay. Okay. I know what you're talking about. I have received numerous letters on behalf of Mr. Smollett. Some of them as recent as today, this morning. And I think it's only fair to publish and spread of record who those letters are from. Generally, they're all asking for mercy. They all know him in different capacities. They're strongly advocating for him, but she can tell me who those letters are from. And I think the special prosecutor has also received the same letters that I've received.
Yes, Your Honor.
And if you want to paraphrase a little bit from the letters, Mr. Allen, you're welcome to.
Sure. Your Honor, the first letter here is from the organization Black Lives Matter. Dear Judge Lynn, Black Lives Matter stands in strong support of an alternative to incarceration sentence for Jussie Smollett. We applaud your long-held practice of imposing alternative to incarceration sentences for virtually all Class 4 felonies, such as Mr. Smollett's, and encourage you to continue this practice in this case. We know that second chance probation, regular probation, and deferred prosecution are all options. As we contemplate what creates a truly safe world, we know that Mr. Smollett's case involves no drugs, no theft, no sex, no property damage, and no physical injury to anyone other than the defendant. Despite the attention paid to it by the media, at its heart, this case involves a low-level, non-violent offense. We urge the court to keep this truth in mind when sentencing Mr. Smollett. We know that the cost that will be expended to met out a sentence involving jail time will be much better used providing much-needed community service. We first came to know Mr. Smollett long before Black Lives Matter's growth into the largest racial and social justice movement in global history. Mr. Smollett has an extensive history in civil rights advocacy and philanthropy. Mr. Smollett personally donated more than $500,000 to Black organizations and gave $125,000 in proceeds from his music tour to organizations working for Black, LGBTQ+, and women's rights, including Black AIDS Institute, which provides high-quality, direct HIV services to Black people, Flint Kids Fund, which funds programs aimed to address and mitigate the impact of lead poisoning and trauma suffered by many children in Flint, Michigan, the Trayvon Martin Foundation, whose main purpose is to provide emotional and financial support to families who have lost a child to gun violence, and Know Your Rights Camp, whose mission is to advance the liberation and well-being of Black and brown communities through education, self-empowerment, mass mobilization, and the creation of new systems to elevate the next generation of change leaders. In 2018, after learning that Bennett College, an all-women's HBCU, was on the brink of losing its accreditation, Mr. Smollett and his brother helped the institution raise the funds needed to retain accreditation. In fact, although the college needed only $5 million, Mr. Smollett and his brother led a campaign that raised $8 million. Beyond his financial contributions, Mr. Smollett has been a fixture in civil rights organizing. We have marched alongside Jussie in fights for health care, to draw attention and resources to the AIDS epidemic, for women's rights, to protect the sanctity of families, and in peace walks. Our relationship with Jussie goes back to the early years of Black Lives Matter, or at least 2016. And it has continued. Despite his struggles with this case, most recently we sat with Mr. Smollett during the anniversary of Trayvon Martin in February 2022, where he flew to Miami to serve as a loving face in the crowd support families whose loved ones were stolen by police and or vigilante violence. In short, Mr. Smollett has demonstrated a long-standing commitment to helping others. Incarcerating Mr. Smollett would be solely punitive in nature. Mr. Smollett does not pose a threat to anyone. Thus, we respectfully request that this court impose a sentence that is an alternative to incarceration, and that's sincerely Melina Abdullah, PhD, the director of Black Lives Matter Grassroots. Also have a letter here from Latonya and Samuel L. Jackson. It's very short, so. I write to you today to ask for mercy as you sentence Jussie Smollett. I understand the difficult nature of your job as you seek to make decisions which take into account the crime and the punishment. It is with respect of knowing this that I humbly implore you to please find an alternative to incarceration for Jussie Smollett. It is my understanding that Jussie was convicted for Class 4 disorderly conduct, which, to my understanding, people convicted of this offense historically are sentenced to various alternatives to incarceration. My husband, actor Samuel Jackson, and I have known Jussie since he was a baby living down the street from us in New York City. We watched him grow from a child who was always kind, full of laughter and joy, into a responsible teenager whom, becoming aware of the inequities suffered by some people in life, became an energetic volunteer helping anyone who was working to alleviate those inequities. Additionally, as a young man, we have worked side by side with Jussie in organizations committed to stopping the HIV/AIDS epidemic in America, as well as dispensing aid to Africa and Israel. Jussie has used his celebrity to impact community outreach work, such as providing water during the Flint, Michigan crisis. We have often broken bread with this young man as we have discussed the right and wrong ways to live. Jussie comes from a family whom we are proud to know intimately, and who we stand ready to provide the support and monitoring assistance that can provide for him in an alternative to probation scenario. Jussie has no prior criminal record and has never been violent. It is incredulous to Sam and to me that this entire criminal situation even exists. Jussie has already suffered a great deal of punishment, as this situation has destroyed his existing career and has impugned his reputation. Please, Judge Lynn, in God's name, please save this young man and allow him to be of service. Jussie Smollett is worth the risk and the investment. Respectfully, Latonya Jackson and Samuel L. Jackson. And we have four here.
Mr. Lewis.
Hey, Judge. Judge, if you'll indulge me for a moment, I'd like to read a letter from the Rainbow Push Coalition that was submitted in support of our client. Dear Judge Lynn, I write as someone who has known Jussie Smollett for over 20 years. I know him to have a strong family background. He is a loving and caring person, and I am familiar with his commitment to community service. It is important to him to use his gifts to support the needs of others. Jussie was raised in a strong and very close-knit family. I urge you to consider several moral issues as you weigh sentencing options. Jussie has no prior felony convictions. He has a history of community service and charitable giving of his time, talent, and treasure. He has sustained a significant loss of income prior to being convicted of any crime. Based on the very public nature of the charges and the trial, Jussie has lost countless career opportunities. I have served as a citizen devoted to having a positive impact on the lives of young men and women in the city of Chicago since 1968. In pursuit of that mission, I have visited the Cook County Jail and several Illinois prisons every year since Operation Breadbasket launched. I have seen firsthand the disastrous impact jail has on far too many young people of color, especially young African American men, who often see a complete loss of hope in their situations. Since this case involves the alleged actions of a very visible public figure, it presents a unique opportunity to send a message to millions of young black and brown men that the system cares for them. This highly publicized Class 4 felony case can be utilized as a positive teaching moment about how the criminal justice system can work to benefit all in our society. I appeal to you in the spirit of righteousness to consider the impact America's criminal justice system has on young black males who struggle every day to survive the streets of urban America. We have an obligation as a society to favor restorative justice rather than retributive justice. Jussie Smollett was convicted of a Class 4 felony, the least severe category of felony in Illinois. A well-established practice in Cook County is to sentence Class 4 disorderly conduct cases to incarceration alternatives. Such alternatives might include second chance probation, regular probation, or deferred prosecution. Additionally, an important consideration in sentencing is the potential for recidivism. Jussie Smollett's lack of felony criminal record, as well as many positive contributions to society, demonstrates that he poses no risk for recidivism. Jussie has a long track record of being deeply engaged and contributing citizen who is committed to helping the most vulnerable in our society, whether persons living with HIV/AIDS and children orphaned by the disease, or children whose health was damaged by the contaminated water in Flint, Michigan. Jussie's commitment to serving the community began as a child. As he found professional success, he continued to donate time and money to charitable causes. Another factor that we urge your honor to consider is that the crime did not involve violence to others. None of the actions charged indicate that Jussie ever posed a threat to public safety. Further, Jussie has already suffered. He has been vilified in the court of public opinion. His professional reputation has been severely damaged. He has suffered lost career opportunities, a loss of income, and there are a number of people who rely on Jussie for financial assistance. Finally, I am deeply concerned about the physical safety and well-being of a well-known, nonviolent black gay man with a Jewish heritage who may be incarcerated within the U.S. prison system. For all the foregoing reasons, I believe the only fair and just outcome is to sentence Jussie Smollett to a non-incarceration alternative. We respectfully urge you to do so. Rainbow Push Coalition welcomes the opportunity to serve as a place for Jussie to resume his desire to serve the community. During the first year of COVID, we served more than 4,000 meals each day. We have a program that is designed to meet some of the issues homeless individuals face each and every day in the city while trying to survive. We believe that those who are impacted by the criminal justice system deserve an opportunity to be restored to a meaningful life and lives throughout community engagement and public service. We have worked diligently to transform the lives of young people in our Push Excel programs. I believe that Jussie has much to give to America, and this case is a stumbling block that should not become a setback to his future. We do not want Jussie to become another prison statistic, as he has way too much to offer. I stand ready, along with the board of directors and the several thousand members of the Rainbow Push Coalition, to support Jussie Smollett in his journey to wholeness. We want to assist this court in meting out justice for Jussie Smollett. Signed, the Reverend Jesse L. Jackson, Sr.
Any other submissions? Ms. Glandian?
Your Honor, I have a letter from Lauren Caseberg on behalf of the Illinois Innocence Project. To the Honorable Judge Lynn, I submit this letter in my personal capacity as co-director of the Illinois Innocence Project. This letter is provided in support of a non-custodial sentence for Jussie Smollett, and also to inform the court that if there is a community service component to Mr. Smollett's sentence, he would be welcome to do so under my direct supervision at the Illinois Innocence Project. At the outset, I want to be clear that the jury found Mr. Smollett guilty, and I respect the jury's verdict. I write to you today regarding his sentence and urge the court to issue a just and fair sentence to Mr. Smollett. In high-profile cases, there is often a tone surrounding a case that seems to call for the harshest possible punishment because of the attention the case has garnered. I would urge Your Honor to silence out those loud voices and see Mr. Smollett for who he is, as a person before you, a human being. The old adage applies here: justice is the law tempered by mercy. Here, while the law may permit you to sentence Mr. Smollett to prison, incarcerating him would not be just. The relentless media coverage of this case is a unique punishment in and of itself for Mr. Smollett. He will carry the stain of this case for the rest of his life, and spend the rest of his life and career working to rebuild and establish his credibility, his reputation, and good name. That lifetime sentence is something this court should consider as a unique punishment already dealt to Mr. Smollett in the court of public opinion. In fact, cases with media attention provide an opportunity for the court to show the public that justice, fairness, and mercy applies to everyone, no matter who they are. If the system doesn't treat a high-profile defendant justly, then what can be expected for the rest of us? If Mr. Smollett, who has no prior felony convictions and no violent background, is sent to prison on a Class 4 conviction, then what does that mean for an unknown defendant who has no one watching or advocating for him? This, of course, intersects with the disparate manner in which people of color are sentenced, with black men receiving the most disproportionately high sentences. During a time in which leaders around our state have put a focus on lessening the incarceration rates in Illinois prisons for justice-related reasons as well as due to COVID-19, there is no justifiable purpose to send Mr. Smollett to prison on a Class 4 conviction. This is especially true when Mr. Smollett could receive a non-custodial sentence, which includes community service where he could do good. Mr. Smollett has a long history of philanthropy which predates this case. As the well-known attorney and founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, Brian Stevenson, has said, "Each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done." Mr. Smollett is no exception. Not only is Mr. Smollett more than the case before you, he has the opportunity to give back to the world in a positive way. At the Illinois Innocence Project, in the course of fulfilling our mission of advocacy, education, and reform, we regularly work with volunteers in a variety of areas. Since 2001, the Illinois Innocence Project has had a robust volunteer program, working successfully with volunteers of various backgrounds who have engaged in work ranging from file organization to case evaluations to office support and more. We have found that volunteers working with us gain a close-up view of the brutal injustices faced by our clients who are all serving decades-long or life sentences for crimes in which they are actually innocent. This up-close view of the trauma inflicted upon these individuals and their loved ones is an awakening and often life-changing experience for our volunteers and staff. In my 9 years working at the Illinois Innocence Project and my 15 years as an attorney working in criminal defense, I have seen the cruelty and dehumanization of prison, as well as how prison impacts people in negative ways. Every person I've ever known who spent time in prison left with increased mental health needs and post-traumatic stress disorder. Incarceration should be reserved for crimes of violence and dangerous individuals, not for someone in Mr. Smollett's position who has no prior felony convictions, no violence in his past, is convicted of a probationable Class 4 offense, and who has much good to still offer this world. Prison time should not be given to satiate the public's calls for retribution. If this court sentences Mr. Smollett to probation with a component of community service, I will make myself available to the court and will comply with any orders of the court related to supervision, timekeeping, and project updates if Mr. Smollett were to have the opportunity to work with our organization. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Lauren Caseberg. Thank you.
Ms. Walker.
Okay, Ms. Walker.
Thank you.
These are the last letters.
So with the court's indulgence, I have 2 letters. The first is from Oscar-nominated winner of 4 Primetime Emmys and 2 Grammys and political activist, Alfre Woodard. Dear Judge Lynn, I hope you and your loved ones are well and are finding a way forward in this time. I am writing to you today as someone who is more than a friend to Jussie Smollett. I am in my 60th decade, and when he was a young teen, as we worked, and we met when he was a young teen, as we worked together to bring shelter, health, and education to South Africa's AIDS orphans. Jussie referred to me as Mama Alfre. It is out of that bond that I make this appeal to you. Jussie was convicted of a Class 4 felony. I know it to be the least severe category of felonies in Illinois. I also have learned it is a well-established practice in your county as well as around the country to sentence Class 4 disorderly conduct cases to alternatives to incarceration, including second chance probation, or deferred prosecution. I respect that an important aspect a trial judge must consider when sentencing someone is the potential for recidivism. Jussie's lack of a felony criminal record, as well as his many years of humanitarian work on behalf of communities in need, is a strong signal that he carries no risk of recidivism. For years, I have been at his side as he's lit up rooms full of elders, men and women battling and living with HIV and AIDS, and playgrounds where the children of those who lost the battle reach for the kind of joy that Jussie brings. Now, some conscientious people reach out to those without access after they achieve success in their given fields. Jussie has been a compassionate presence and advocate for those without means since he was a boy. His dedicated work as an artist brought him success and allowed him to bring his natural impulse to be of assistance to an even wider field of effectiveness. Jussie has kept his heart, his wallet, and his schedule wide open to those suffering among us. Judge Lynn, I know you and I are meeting, quote unquote, in a situation that would cause some, quote unquote, mamas to lower their eyes. But I must tell you, I am proud of this man, who I have known to be an exceptionally kind human being. It is an honor to write you on his behalf because I get to sit and think on Jussie this afternoon. It brings up wonderful thoughts. My dear friend Jussie Smollett has been convicted of a nonviolent crime. He never has been, and certainly is not now, a public safety risk. He has carried himself with dignity and self-control throughout this process of the last few years. He has delved deeper spiritually in self-realization to come through a vicious public excoriation that would have crushed or inflamed lesser men. The punishing has been relentless and has left nothing to be taken away. He has already paid a professional and personal price that few in real power have even for crimes against the health and safety of millions. Through it all, Jussie has stood like the good man I know him to be. Bottom line, if he is incarcerated, I fear for his safety. I fear for his safety. Judge Lynn, I've heard you characterized as a fair man. It is your fairness and your discernment that my hope is relying upon in this matter. You hold the keys to the freedom and the future of a great giver, Jussie Smollett, to keep his commitment of bringing joy and hope to people whose everydays depend on that healing. I beg your leniency. Sincerely, Alfre, Woodard. So the last letter is from Derek Johnson, who is the president and chief executive officer of the NAACP. Dear Judge Lynn, I write today in my capacity as president and CEO of the NAACP. Formed in 1909, the NAACP is the oldest and largest civil rights organization in the United States. In this nation, Black people are incarcerated at more than 5 times the rate of whites and frequently receive disparate sentencing. In Illinois, Black defendants convicted of a felony were more likely than white defendants to be sentenced to prison at a 57% and 39% rate, respectively. A mainstay of our organization continues to be advocacy for fair treatment of persons of color by the criminal justice system. This brings us to the subject of the upcoming sentencing of Jussie Smollett. It would be an understatement to say that an inordinate amount of attention has been given to Mr. Smollett's case. This case involves no drugs, no theft, no sex, no property damage, and no physical injury to anyone other than the defendant. Despite the attention paid to it by the media, at its heart, this case involves a low-level, nonviolent offense. We urge the court to keep this truth in mind when sentencing Mr. Smollett. By way of background, Mr. Smollett has an extensive history in civil rights advocacy and philanthropy. Mr. Smollett personally donated more than $500,000 to Black organizations and gave $125,000 in proceeds from his music tour to organizations including the organizations working for Black, LGBTQ+, and women's rights, including the Black AIDS Institute, which provides high-quality, direct HIV services to Black people, the Flint Kids Fund, which funds programs aimed to address and mitigate the impact of lead poisoning and the trauma suffered by children in Flint, Michigan, the Trayvon Martin Foundation, whose main purpose is to provide emotional and financial support to families who have lost a child to gun violence, the Know Your Rights Camp, whose mission is to advance the liberation and well-being of Black and brown communities through education, self-empowerment, mass mobilization, and the creation of new systems that elevate the next generation of change leaders. In 2018, Mr. Smollett surprised a 6-year-old double amputee with a wheelchair-accessible van after learning that the child's school district did not own such a vehicle. Mr. Smollett has been a recognized supporter of the Human Rights Campaign, a civil rights organization that strives to end discrimination against LGBTQ+ people and realize a world that achieves fundamental fairness and equality for all. Lest there be an argument that such donations and activities were made as a part of any PR damage control, such acts all preceded the 2019 events that resulted in charges being brought against Mr. Smollett. In 2018, after learning that Bennett College, an all-women's HBCU, which stands for Historically Black College and University, was on the brink of losing its accreditation, Mr. Smollett and his brother helped the institute raise the funds needed to retain accreditation. In fact, the college needed only $5 million. Mr. Smollett and his brother led a campaign that was so successful they raised $8 million. Mr. Smollett's civil rights work began when he was a child who served as an NAACP youth volunteer. In 2016, Mr. Smollett won the Chairman's Award at the NAACP Image Awards. The Chairman's Award is given in recognition of individuals who have committed themselves to acts of public service while using their platforms to create effective change. In short, Mr. Smollett has demonstrated a long-standing commitment to helping others. We believe that incarcerating Mr. Smollett would be solely punitive and would serve no purpose. As this court may know, in 2015, Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner created a criminal justice task force to identify areas of the criminal justice system that could be reformed that would result in a 25% reduction in the prison population by 2025. One such proposal for reform was reducing the incarceration rate of persons convicted of Class 4 nonviolent felonies. This is precisely the type of offense of which Mr. Smollett was convicted. Finally, Mr. Smollett does not pose, nor has he ever posed, a threat to anyone. Thus, we respectfully ask, assuming this court is inclined to sentence Mr. Smollett to anything other than a monetary fine or a suspended sentence, that the court sentence Mr. Smollett to probation and mandatory community service. Respectfully submitted, Derek Johnson, President and CEO of NAACP. Thank you. Thank you, Judge, for your time.
We wish to publish or further letters, Your Honor. We incorporate other letters into the record.
They will be incorporated. No further letters. I'm ready to keep going. Do lawyers need a break, or are you ready to go?
Maybe, can we have a short break?
Yes, sure you can. Yes.
Very short.
5 minutes. 5-minute recess.